first person this week, Delaware State Treasurer Ken Simpler. Ken, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Shirley.
We have a lot of things to get into, but I want to start with, we're nearing the end of your first year, as state treasurer. How are things going?
I'll let other people judge how they're going. I am excited by the job every day. I am very grateful for the people of Delaware giving me the opportunity. 10 months into it, probably I would say, if anything, the opportunity set is larger than what I thought it was. But the question of being able to do things, being able to be efficacious, actually get things done in government is still something I'm trying to understand and trying to prioritize my time where not only the things are important, but where I think I can actually be effective.
Bigger job than what you had expected, or about what you expected?
No, as I said, I think it's bigger. I think the opportunity set is larger, and I think it's not just the day job. I had a good handle on what it likely would be, but I've been surprised pleasantly by the scope and the reach of what I'm able to get involved with on committees and task forces and the councils that I either are standing or that I've been appointed to, and that's been very, I think, important work for my office as well as for the state of Delaware. So that's probably been the biggest surprise.
You've sort of been missing from the headlines.
I hate to disappoint you.
Your predecessor, Chip Flowers, obviously it was no secret about his relationship with the Cash Management Policy Board and the members there. Describe your relationship with the board members.
I think it's very collegial. It's a very nuts and bolts type of committee. It's not a committee that looks to be in the newspaper. It's not the type of committee that thinks it's doing work that belongs on the front page of the news journal. It's a fairly serious business of going about trying to figure out in this challenging interest rate environment, in this challenging environment to put the state's money to work to earn money, how do you do it responsibly? How do you adhere to your general mandate of being safe, but making operational funds available and earning a decent return? And in my experience, it's been a very workmanlike committee.
Now, you served on the DFAC Advisory Council on Revenues. Love that title.
Yep.
Now,
try that acronym on for size.
Right. Now, the council looked at where the state earns income, where it spends money, and going back to that income, where it comes from. So, what are our revenue sources, and is there a problem with them?
Well, what I've tried to frame to people that they can get their arms around, and it's not that tough. People sometimes shy away from numbers, especially if they get big, but forget the billion on the number. We have $4 billion of spending and roughly $4 billion of revenue. It's a little less, but that's a nice round number. Effectively, Delaware, and the challenge with our revenue system is that we have grown reliant on two sources that together probably generate on the order of magnitude of 2/3 of our revenue. And I'm cheating a little bit because I'm combining what we call abandoned property with our corporate franchise, and those two sort of do go hand in hand. One wouldn't exist without the other. But if you put those together, it might be closer to 70% of our revenues, and that means that we're really reliant on two very substantial streams, and they've been performing. They've been performing quite well over time. But if you pull that abandoned property piece away, and you say that maybe 55% of our revenues come from the personal income tax, the corporate franchise tax, and that abandoned property piece is not something we own, it's not something we can necessarily count on, then you're left with a big piece of the pie that comes from a lot of very small sources that are less than 5%. And are those sources well thought out? Have we constructed that portfolio revenues in a way that really, let's not argue about how much or how little it is, but have we constructed in a way that's the most predictable, that gives certainty to the way we operate our state? Have we constructed in a way that it's predictable, so we're not running around in Dover every year trying to find a couple quarters under the rug? And have we constructed in a way that it's most conducive to the economic development of the state? That was really the mission of the task force, was to try to get, forget about arguing whether it's too much or too little, but how we raise it is also important, and how we construct it, it has significance for how confident we can operate this enterprise we call state government.
Well, what were some of the recommendations for a more predictable source of income?
Some of the key recommendations were to look again at it as a portfolio. So we have these two strong performers, but where's the rest of the portfolio and how strong is it? what's the quality of those revenues that we get from those other sources. So one recommendation was we need to focus on building out a little bit of a supporting cast. We got 2 star players, but those star players, to have a diversified, a well-rounded set of revenues, would benefit by having a couple more key supporting cast members. Where are those going to come from? Well, one was to maybe shrink down our reliance on that abandoned property source. One was to look at our 2 business taxes. We have a gross receipts tax and a corporate income tax, and maybe try to pick a best in breed from those 2. And then the long range, suggestion was we really need to focus on what is that maybe 5th component of our revenue system, where we choose not to have a sales tax. We choose to be one of the lowest property taxing states in the country. I think we rely on 6% of our revenues come from the property tax as opposed to 14% for the average state. You can't necessarily take, whereas in most states, property tax and sales tax, those could be as much as a third each. So we do have to wrestle with this issue of exporting taxes and how we construct our own sources of revenue over the long term.
An independent study released by the Delaware Business Roundtable says that Delaware is the 7th highest spender on state and local government services. How can we spend smarter, in your opinion?
That was a very telling statistic, and when we sat on the Advisory Council on Revenues, and remember, I've talked about revenues because that was our mission. The spending component, the second piece, or if there's 3 legs of the stool and we get to it in 7.5 minutes, revenue certainty is one. Being certain about where your revenues come from. The second piece was spending discipline. And the third piece that we didn't get on the Advisory Council revenue, but it's been a big focus of mine, is value. It's the intersection of the 2. What do you get for your money? If you spend a lot, you would hope that you get outsized returns, right? Better than average returns than, say, are there 49 states. And if you spend a little, you shouldn't expect to necessarily get much better than what you spend on. The challenging part for us in Delaware is right now, because we get so much money from other people, it's not necessarily our own money. Maybe half of our revenues are effectively exported. We're a high spender. Now, whether that's causality, whether it's easier to spend other people's money because you don't feel it coming out of your own wallet, I would say it's part of the problem. But on average, when you combine state and local spending, and the Business Roundtable study failed to sort of make that distinction, that's really important because some states spend a lot at the local level, some states spend a lot at the state level. So you really have to combine it to get a fair comparison with other states. But when you combine them, Delaware does come out as the 7th, really 6th highest spending state on a per capita basis, and 20% more than the national average. So 20% is a very substantial premium that we need to get our arms around because we're not getting 20% better results. So, when you look at what we spend and what we get, the challenge is we're spending 20% higher when you're taking a fair comparison of state and local, but we're getting generally middling to slightly less than middling results in our core areas of return on education, return on healthcare outcomes, return on our safety and security net. Delaware is a shockingly, when you look at the statistics, it doesn't feel this way to me. I grew up here, but we're ranked the 3rd most violent state in FBI crime statistics. That's shocking to me. So those key spends, that's, and transportation infrastructure, that's 75% or to 80% of the dollars we spend. We have to demand a higher return on those, and we have to figure out how, as a government, we get a better return.
We're quickly running out of time, but I do want to get to this one question. You had held a fundraiser recently. What were you raising money for?
It was more, we call it fundraisers, but when I was campaigning, I got to touch people every day. I have been almost, as you pointed out, a year since my election. I haven't had an event. So in part, it was just to reconnect with the people who supported me. So it was not a large ticket event. It was trying to get people back so I could communicate to them for 20 or 25 minutes and just say, guys, here's what I've been up to the last 10 months. And I hope this comports with what you expected when you sent me to the treasurer's office. But it was a way just around the anniversary of my election of saying, one, thank you, and yes, asking for some more money. We don't want to be completely dormant. When you're in public office, it's easy just to go to Dover every day, which is what I do, and put your head down and try to get the work done. But you have to recognize that you are still a political officer, and so there is, I won't say baggage, but there is, obligations that come with remaining politically relevant and doing some of those things.
So you're not raising money to launch a gubernatorial bid to run against Democrat John Carney next year?
I really thought that was going to be your second question. And no, I can say that I am not going to do that. I am not raising money to do that. I am very happy being the state treasurer, and I think I can add a lot of value to working with the current governor as well as who's our next governor.
Safe to say that you're supporting Republican State Senator Colin Bonini then in the run?
I will be supporting whoever emerges as the winner of the Republican primary for governor.
Okay, Delaware State Treasurer Ken Simpler, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for joining us on First.
Very good. Thanks, Shirley.